Yo, welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. As always, excited to have you guys here. If you're watching on YouTube, I got a little bit of a different background today. You see, I got my bookshelf in the back. I had to pull off of my wall the Rosary and Real Estate, the Pray the Rosary, Buy Real Estate frame that I have for the event tonight. Because tonight, I'm recording this on Tuesday, February 18th. The event, the first ever Rosary and Real Estate event, is tonight. So I'm actually bringing that artwork, that frame, to the event to display to welcome everybody in. So I kind of changed up my background a little bit on the show today just to kind of give a little bit more of a aesthetic look, because the wall with just two of the three frames just looks pretty stupid. So I don't want that in my background. But otherwise, besides that, everything's going great. Tonight, as I mentioned, is the first ever Rosary and Real Estate event. If you are coming, you will have listened to this episode after the event. So I hope that you've already enjoyed it. But one thing that I will say is if you can't make it out to the event because it's an in-person event, and I understand that, probably a decent chunk of my audience isn't located in New Jersey where I live, or even maybe in Pennsylvania or Delaware or New York or somewhere where they could travel. And at the same time, the event's 90 minutes. So I'm not necessarily expecting people from upstate New York to travel 3.5 hours down to get to an event that's only 90 minutes in that sense, right? So, but what I want to share with you guys is at this event, I'm also launching something else in regards to, obviously, we have the Rosary and Real Estate meetups that are going to be hopefully every month, if not every month and a half, those kind of meetups. And at the meetups, my goal really is to talk about the Rosary and talk about real estate investing, and for it to be educational, for it to be networking, for it to be, faith and financially growing, and obviously to bring in a really, really good community. However, my second tier to this is to create a legitimate community and something that I'm calling the Order of Rosary and Real Estate. And if you are interested, now the thing is, you don't need to be local to New Jersey for you to be in the Order of Rosary and Real Estate. It's really what it is. It's building a legitimate community that want to take it a step further, for people that want to take it a step further than just kind of coming out to one of the events to learn a little bit about the Rosary or to learn a little bit about real estate, to people who want to actually really be committed. And there's only two obligations for people that want to join the Rosary and Real Estate, the Order of Rosary and Real Estate. Obligation number one is you need to pray the Rosary weekly. That is it. Ideally, you pray all 20 decades per week, but at least have one session where you pray the Rosary every single week. And my honest opinion and goal of this is to get everybody to pray a Rosary daily. That's really the level that we want to be at. But when you join the Order of Rosary and Real Estate, you are committing to pray the Rosary at least once a week. And on top of that, the second obligation is that you are committing to pursue purchasing real estate for generational wealth. Those are the only two things. So if you are listening to this podcast and you want to be a member of the Order of Rosary and Real Estate, congratulations. As long as you fill those two obligations, you can join, right? There are benefits that come with joining, not just for the fact of, being a member. You're going to have actual benefits as well. And a few of the benefits include some of these. You're going to get access to the exclusive Facebook group that I'm going to create. The Facebook group is going to be full of people who pray the Rosary devoutly and people who buy real estate. And we're going to be posting on that Facebook group, and you're going to be able to use the community for questions, and you're going to be able to ask questions of those Facebook group, and I'll answer it, and other people that are in the community will answer it. So it's going to build kind of a good community foundation. The second is also prayer intention. So if you are, a Catholic or a Christian and you're devout and you want to continue to, learn how to pray the Rosary, and you also are someone who has some prayer intentions, I'm going to be creating a running document that you could add your prayer intentions to. And why this is important is because as a member of the Order of Rosary and Real Estate, before you pray your Rosary, it is going to be asked of you that you look at that document and you keep another member of the community in mind as you pray your Rosary. So you kind of are getting some, secondary and primary prayer, options and outreach just by joining the group as well. We're also going to be doing a monthly newsletter. We'll all be coming out every single month with a newsletter that'll allow you to kind of learn a little bit more about the Rosary, learn a little bit more about real estate. And another thing that's definitely involved in the membership is going to be exclusive member-only meetings. And because there's going to be a lot of people that are maybe not necessarily just, like I said, located in New Jersey or surrounding area, most of these meetings are going to be virtual meetings. We may do some stuff in person, and if we do, we're going to have a virtual setup for anybody that's not in the area. But they're going to be more so virtual virtual setting, and we're really going to focus on investing strategies. I'm going to bring in, some other people to do some guest speaking on certain things such as asset protection, such as, flipping and new construction and buy and hold and all these other things. We're going to have guest speakers that are in there, and we're going to focus on really understanding the rosary, what the rosary is, the abilities and capabilities of the spiritual weapon of the rosary, and why praying it is going to lead us to eternal life. And that's really it. So the order of Rosary and Real Estate is really a membership that's totally free. We will be asking for donations through the order. In some cases, those donations will go to the order itself. So we could order. We could order things like merch. We could hold events. We could do certain things along those lines. But other ones will be for charitable donations, like Good Counsel Homes, which I've mentioned a handful of times on the show. The Be Positive Foundation for Pediatric Cancer is another one that I hold close to my heart, and other charitable donations as well that we'll be asking for in regards to some foundations. So if you are interested in joining the Order of Rosary and Real Estate, like I said, you do not need to be local to New Jersey. You could just straight up hit me up on Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI, and I will get you enrolled. You will get a nice certificate with your name on it, your member number on it, and I will sign off on the certificate also. So I'm excited for it. I'm really, really excited for the event tonight, and I'm really excited to roll out the Order of the Rosary and Real Estate. So again, if you're interested, let me know. But in any regard, let's get into the episode today. So I had a moment last night and another moment today where I really realized, having good people around you is just a huge lifesaver. So last night I was coming downstairs and I was bringing the gift basket down that we're giving away tonight at Rosary and Real Estate. And my light was on in my bedroom, and Christina was downstairs. She was vacuuming. There were a few other lights on downstairs. Bernadette was down there. And I turned off my bedroom light, and all of a sudden, all of the lights in the house went out. And I was like, what the heck just happened? And the first thing that comes to mind is all right, maybe the breaker tripped or something. So I go downstairs, and all of the breakers are in their same spot. So I'm like, all right, let me call my electrician, Will. And Will does a ton of work for us. I mean, Will's probably doing weekly jobs for us with all the stuff that we have going on. So him and I are tight. And he's helped me out in some other jams as well, and just in my house when I have electrical problems. So I give him a call, and he picks up immediately, and he's like, yo, I saw you were calling, and I know it's late night, so something must have happened. What's going on? And I'm like, yeah, Will, I don't know what just happened, but I turned off my bedroom light, and all of a sudden, all the lights in my kitchen, my living room, my bedroom are out. And I'm looking at the box right now, and the breaker that it's on, it says that it has the kitchen, the living room, and the bedroom light. And there's other things that are still on, right? My dishwasher's on, my stove's on, the hallway light was still turning on, the bathroom light was still turning on. So he's like, all right, flick them all off, flick them back on. We're trying, and it's not working. He's like, go see if the GFCIs are still on. They were still on. And ultimately, he ends up coming out. And this is 7:30 at night. He ends up coming out. He ends up getting over. And he quickly understands what the problem is. He pulls off my panel. And I bought this house. As I mentioned, this is the house I fell in love with. Excuse me. This is the house I fell in love with my wife in. If you haven't heard that episode, it's one of my first episodes. But I bought this house back in April of 2024. And my wife used to live in this house. She used to rent a room here. And I knew that, I've been in this house before, and that the electrical box was relatively updated. I mean, it was updated in 2016. And he pulls off the panel box, and most of it is fully updated. However, that one line still has aluminum wire, which is, for anybody that doesn't know, and I'm not an electrician, so I don't know all of this stuff. I learned just a ton from hearing these guys talk. It's pretty much one step up from knob and tube. And if you have any familiarity as an investor with knob and tube wiring, it is the worst. First off, it's a massive fire hazard. It's very old, but the wiring itself just deteriorates, and it's just really, really bad. Also, there's a lot of insurance companies that won't even insure the house if it's got knob and tube. They ask for it to be remediated. So I've dealt with my fair share of knob and tube. And when he was like, oh, it's aluminum wire, I was like, oh, that's fantastic. It's not knob and tube. He's like, yeah, it's almost the same thing, though. So ultimately, what we ended up realizing is that there is a GFI outlet in my living room. And that wire runs right to that GFI outlet. Now, there's a GFI outlet in my living room because there's no ground wire. So they kind of have that there as a safety net, it seems like. And when I guess there was maybe just too much kind of on it, which is kind of odd because we've had that before. We've had the bedroom light on, the kitchen light on, the dining room light on. It didn't really matter. But for whatever reason, it tripped that GFI outlet. And he just said that it's kind of running out of juice and we're probably going to need to replace it soon. So he didn't have one on him at the moment, but he was able to quickly reset it. And then bada bing, bada boom, all of the lights ended up going on. And I was just like, wow, it's fantastic. Like, I love this type of stuff. I love that I have an electrician. That's my boy that'll come out and take care of this stuff immediately, right? And it's just great when you have those connections. And as a real estate investor, you get access to a lot of those connections. And it's fantastic. So, and then I had another situation today where I ended up in eviction court today. And before I was in eviction court today, I was texting with the councilman yesterday, and him and I were supposed to meet up for lunch yesterday. However, my partner Steve got stuck in Florida because of the storm. His flight ended up getting canceled, so I had to pick up some of his tasks for the day, so I had to reschedule. But I knew I was going to eviction court this morning, and I just hit up the councilman and was like, "Hey, I'm going to court. This is my first time with this judge. Any pieces of advice or whatever?" And he was like, "Yo, this judge is my boy. Like, don't, he's great. Like, you're in good hands, X, Y, and Z." And I don't know necessarily if he directly hit him up. He might have, he might not have. But long story short, I go to court today, and it was a great experience. And the rest of this episode, I'm going to kind of talk about my court experience, but I'm going to talk about before that just why I ended up here. So evictions, for the most part, like aren't, especially when you're scaling a portfolio, like they're not super, super uncommon, I will say. The better that you screen, obviously, the less that you're going to end up in court. But at the end of the day, when you're buying a bunch of properties, and especially depending on kind of like your tenant pool and stuff like that, it's not super uncommon. But this one honestly blindsided me a little bit. So I inherited this tenant, and I bought this house back in September of 2024 with my partner Steve, and we bought it with a hard money loan. And that hard money loan is a 9-month loan. It expires in July. So when we purchased this property, it was a little bit on the back burner for the renovation that we were going to do. And when we purchased it, we ended up screening the tenant, and she was a really good tenant. And like, she was good paying, like we saw proof of payment. And ultimately, I was kind of like, hey, like I'm on board to keep this tenant if it makes sense. And before we even purchased the property, I had a conversation with her, and I let her know. I said, hey, listen, like, this is what we do. We buy houses. We have to renovate those houses and then rent them out for market value. That is our business model. Now, you're on a month-to-month lease. We could go about this two ways. Like, I could give you 30-day notice and you could, go find another place, or we are working on a 2-bedroom unit right now that you might be interested in. And if you are, you could go into that unit once it's completely renovated. We'll obviously have to adjust the rent that you're paying right now versus what we would have to charge there. But if it's within your ballpark and you could still make it happen, like, we'd love to keep you as a tenant. And to be honest with you guys, like, I run this with a lot of the tenants that I inherit for a couple of reasons. As long as they fit the bill as a good tenant, it works for me, right? Like, I'll take them, and if I'm seeing that they're paying their rent on time and everything's good on that end of the spectrum, and then that they pass the screening process and they pass our our minimum standards, like, then that's good, and then it all kind of works out. But ultimately, the way that we operate is we're kind of like a little bit lagging in our renovations. So when we buy a house, we don't always touch it right away. Like, it might be a month, it might be 2 months, it might be 3 months. In this case, it was a little bit further out, even because we just kind of like had a big influx of properties that we bought at one time. And that's something that we're trying to iron out just within the business, is bringing on more crews or getting our crew to be able to handle more jobs. But if we could keep a tenant for that period of time, then we minimize our holding costs on that property. So even if they're paying below market because their house is not really great, that's one of the reasons why we bought it, then at least we're still like not getting, slashed on what we're paying every single month out of our pocket on the mortgage. They're either covering that mortgage, or they're getting a little bit more than that mortgage, or they're at least getting close to it where we're not taking as big of a hit. So ideally, I don't necessarily go into houses and just start kicking people out and then have vacancies. And at the same time, just because of the area that I buy in, there are squatter problems. So if I have a vacant property, now I need to worry about, is a squatter going to break in? I got to make sure I board that house up properly and do all of that stuff. So if I have a tenant in there, I'm not only making money, but I also have a little bit of sense of security on the home also. So we inherit her. And ultimately, we're working on this 2-unit, and the arrangement is pretty much like, hey, look, you're paying $850 right now for a 3-bedroom, which is just out of pocket. Like, it's just not even close. We are doing up a nice 2-bedroom unit, and we could give it to you for $1,250. If you think that you would take the 2-bedroom unit for $1,250, we could absolutely make that work. And initially, before we even closed on this property, she was in agreement for it. She was cool with it. We end up closing in September. A couple months go by. We're working on that 2-bedroom renovation. It's a duplex that we're doing a couple of things for. We have a couple other renovations that we're finishing up, the portfolio that we closed on, etc. And she ends up coming out to look at the property. Now, the property is about 80% done. And I have been burned a handful of times by showing properties to tenants before they're fully completed. And the reason that is just because tenants don't see it the way that we see it, right? Like when I walk into a absolutely destroyed property, I see a destroyed property, but I see the potential of what could be. When tenants walk into a property, whether it's destroyed or whether it's 90% done, 99% done, they don't see it for what it could be. They see it for what it is, right? So this is one of the mistakes that we've made a couple of times, and I'm trying my best to really avoid showing properties to tenants before it's completely finished. And it's a little bit hard because I would like to get them locked in so that right away, once it's finished, boom, we could already have the refinance in process and make the ball roll even faster. But what we're seeing is we're kind of showing them a little bit early to some tenants, and it's just kind of, they're not seeing it the way that it's going to be, and they either want to come back out and see it when it's done, or they just totally aren't interested in it and they end up moving on. So this is one of the situations where she came out and it was about 80% done, maybe even a little bit more than that. But one thing that wasn't done were the windows, and one of the windows was cracked, and she was so convinced that there was a bullet hole through the window, and she was totally turned off by the property. So at this point, we're like in end of November, beginning of December. And she didn't want it. And I said, hey, look, like that's totally fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I just got, here's your 30-day notice. Like at this point, you need to be out by January 1st. And then my property manager, like she was on top of her, like making sure that everything was going okay. So the tenant ends up saying that she ends up finding another place, right? And she's kind of got like a side piece man who's like in the picture. It's a little bit like hairy. Like he stays at the property. Again, she pays. I inherited her. I don't really care too much, but like he's not on the lease, and that's like a problem, right? But long story short, she like is like talking with her mans, and they end up finding a place. And at this point, I'm also offering her other like options. I'm like, hey, look, I know this one didn't work out. I have a 3-bedroom. We're asking $1,650 on it. I'm willing to give it to you for $1,500 because I really like you and I'd like to maintain you as a tenant, right? Or hey, we got this 1-bedroom. Honestly, I'd probably be asking like $1,150 for it, but I'll give it to you for $1,000. Like I'm trying to throw deals at her, and she's got this man who is just looking for the cheapest option. And they end up finding a place. Supposedly, they find a 3-bedroom for $1,000. It's probably a dump, but it is what it is. And actually, it is a dump because she verified it with me. I got on the phone with her one time. I was like, hey, I'm sure you're really excited about moving into your new place. And she was like, no, not really. I was like, okay, yeah. So long story short, she's supposed to move out in January. And my property manager is kind of like keeping in tabs with her, and she just starts going rogue. And she's not really being responsive, and she's not giving kind of a clear answer. My property manager's like, hey, like, just want to confirm you're going to be out by December 31st. And she was like, well, my lease is on the 3rd. Like the date that we signed was on the 3rd. So like I should have until January 3rd. My property manager's telling me this. And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, like 4 days, like I don't really care. Like she's just got to be out. Well, January 3rd rolls around. You guys could probably guess it. She's not out. And she's not answering my property manager. And there's a guy in the city that I operate with that I've worked with a handful of times on some tenant stuff. And he's kind of like, I refer to him as like the Batman of the city. Like he just gets a bunch of calls from like tenants in regards to like housing. And like I met him when I bought this property because I think this tenant thought like I was going to kick her out immediately and take advantage of her. And she ends up calling him. And she's pretty much like, hey, like, Frankie's property manager is really pressing me on leaving. And then he ends up calling me. And he's kind of like, yo, like, what's going on here? And I'm like, dude, what is happening right now? Because she told me that she was going to be out in the beginning of January, and she's not out yet. So I don't know where she's coming from with this. But long story short, I step in. I pretty much tell my property manager, like, hey, pull back a little bit. Like, let me talk to her. And I give her a call, and it's very cordial. It's very, very cordial. And she tells me, she's like, I just feel like I'm being pressed. And I'm just like, like I have a place lined up, but, we're just not ready to move into it yet. And I was like, all right, well, tell me like when you're ready to go. And she was like, I need till the 1st of February. And I'm like, got it. I'm like, well, if you need till the 1st of February, then you're going to have to pay rent for January. And she starts giving me this whole story about how she paid the old landlord in September and she shouldn't have to pay another month. Like she's trying to tell me that she paid an extra month because she paid the landlord and she paid me. And in truth, like that's not totally inaccurate. The landlord took her security deposit because she didn't pay the landlord when we closed in September. And then when we closed on it, she paid me directly for the month. So pretty much the story is the landlord was like, she didn't pay me. I'm taking the security deposit. And she paid me in full for the month, where she really should have like paid the landlord and I should have kept the security deposit and the landlord should have prorated it to me. Again, small mistakes that when you're buying a portfolio, they don't seem big at the time, but now they find you and catch you 5 months later and they're like, hey, it's me. But anyway, she ends up giving me like this whole story about why she shouldn't pay. And I'm just like, listen, I need you out by February 1st. I was like, I will credit you for the month of January. I'll let you stay there, but you need to promise me that you're going to be out by February 1st. And if you are not out by February 1st, I am going to evict you. And I said it just straight up in that sense. And that was it, period, stop. And she was like, okay, like, I really, really appreciate it. Like, thank you so much. Like, you know, I was just feeling really pressed, X, Y, and Z, and I will be out on February 1st. So about January 20th rolls around and I give her a call and I'm like, hey, how's everything going? She's like, good. I'm on my way to Vegas right now with my daughter. And I'm like, wow. Like, that's awesome. She was like, yeah, my daughter got it for me as like a birthday present. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm just checking in. I just want to make sure like you're good to go to like move next week. And she was like, oh, I didn't realize it was next week. And I'm like, yeah, it's next week. So like, you got to make sure you get a moving company and everything. And I'm already predicting it. I'm like, this is not going to go well. And I have to remind her again. I'm like, I'm just letting you know, I'm going to file an eviction if you are not out by February 1st. And she's like, yeah, no, like I'll be out. So she gets back from Vegas. It's like January 25th. She gets back home. I call her. She's like, yeah, we're on track. 2 days later, I get a call. Frank, I got some bad news. I'm like, okay, tell me. Well, the pipe burst in the other house that we were going to move into, and now we can't move in. And I'm like, got it. Listen, at the end of the day, I addressed what was going to happen if you guys aren't out, and now I have no choice but to file for an eviction. So we file for an eviction. And again, this was a blindside hit because I actually very much like this tenant and I thought she was very, very good. And I think the deadbeat that she's just like hanging around with and doing dumb things with is probably one of the bigger influences of what's going on here. The one that's not on the lease, that's living in the house. So I file for the eviction. And today I am in eviction court. And there's something about every time I am in eviction court, the tenants decide to show up. And it is just so annoying. Not because I lose, because I haven't, knock on wood, right? I won the first one and I won this one today, but because it gives them an option to appeal it, right? So I'll just kind of give you guys a little bit of a setting here, right? So I walk in eviction court and here's how how it works here. And I know in some cases in like New Jersey, it's like brutal. Like you might be waiting like 6 months to, get a court date. But pretty much when I go to file for an eviction court, I fill out a form. And I put the reasoning behind why I'm filing. And in this particular case, I had a handful of reasons. I had 2 missed months of rent, right? So I had missed month for January and missed month for February, $850 each, plus $50 late fee on both, a total of $1,700 that I'm missing in rent. I also filed an eviction based off the fact that there's someone living in the home that is not on the lease and they're actively living there. And I filed that. And after I filed, I paid a $165 fee. Right? I don't have an attorney involved in this. I didn't have an attorney involved in the other eviction that I've talked about on the show a couple of times. And probably about a week later, I get a notice in the mail with the court date. And ultimately, it's about 2 weeks out that I get the actual court date. Now, the tenant also gets that. I don't know if they actually get served because technically I am suing them. I don't know if someone actually goes up and serves them or they just send them a notice like they send me. But in any regard, she gets one as well. So I'm walking in, and at this time, I have my property manager with me, and they're sitting in the parking lot, and I gave her my cell phone. And the reason that is because they don't let you bring your cell phone in court. And because Christina is today, on this Tuesday, 38 weeks pregnant, I'm on baby alert. And I'm like, yeah, if my wife's water breaks and I'm in court for 2 hours, like I need to know about this. So my property manager just posted up in the car waiting with my phone to see if my wife ends up calling and then she'll run in and get me. Thankfully, it didn't happen. But long story short, I leave my phone in there and I walk in. And of course, like the tenant walks in right behind me and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me with this. So I'm just like, hey, like what's going on? How are you? And she's like, hi. And then we end up walking into the court and we sit separately. And the judge ends up coming in. And like I said, this is the judge that my councilman buddy was saying he's really close with. And he comes in. It's my first time meeting him. And thankfully, we were the first ones that were called. I don't know if that was part of, like I said, maybe my councilman buddy hit him up and was like, yo, take care of this guy real quick. Or it might have just been luck. I'm not 100% sure. But we're the first ones that are called. And we go up there. And they swear you in, right? So she had to swear, that everything she tell over the Bible. I had to do the same exact thing. And then he puts the ball in my court, and he's like, "All right, Frank, like tell me about why we're here today." And I was like, honestly, I said it, of course, in a polite way. I'm kind of just, talking the way that I talk here. But I was like, I'm here because of eviction court. And I bought this property in September of 2024, and I inherited this tenant here. And truthfully, and I said this was like truthfully, like she's been a phenomenal tenant. Like I have absolutely no complaints about my experience with her. However, she was supposed to move out on January 1st. And when January 1st rolled around, she wasn't moving out, and she asked for an extension to February, and I granted it, and she didn't pay rent in January. And then February 1st rolled around, and she's still not out, and she hasn't made any payment towards rent on February. So I'm here for the fact that, she is still in the home after she told me that she was vacating, and I have, contractors that are ready to do the job. I have lenders that are ready to do the job, and I was expecting that this property was going to be vacant at this time. And then I also had mentioned, I was like, and on top of that, like I said, she's a really great tenant. I've tried to set her up with some of our other properties, but she didn't, have any interest in them, which is totally fair. It's totally her call. However, she's given me notice that she was going to be out in January and now February, and we're still here and she's not out of the property. And I also said that there's someone else that's living in the home that's not on the lease. I was like, I don't necessarily have the biggest problem with that. However, it seems like now it's becoming a little bit of an issue, and it's a reason why she's staying in there. Then he pretty much put the ball in her court, and she was like, what do you have to say in regards to this whole situation? And she pretty much was just like, well, the property that he's talking about wasn't available until December, so I couldn't get out there to see it. And when I went to see it, there was a bullet hole in the window. I'm just like, here we go. And she was like, and then, we ended up finding a place, but we were supposed to move in February 1st, and then this pipe burst. And because of that, we can't move into this place. And the judge looks at me and he's like, what are you asking in regards to the rent? I was like, in all honesty, Your Honor, all I want is possession. I don't even care about the $1,700 that's owed to me and my partner, because at the end of the day, I also understand, I said this, I was like, I also understand that when I inherit tenants and I tell them that they need to leave, they need to also save up money for a deposit. So for the sake of that, I don't even care about the 2 months that she owes me. I simply want possession. And he said, what about the court fees? I was like, I'll eat the court fees. I don't even care about that. I just want the house. And he looks at her and he just says, anything else you want to add? And she said, no. And he was like, okay, well, I grant in favor of Frank D'Astoli, and he is going to get possession of the house. And the way that it works is you have 10 days. Both parties have 10 days to appeal it. After that, Frank could schedule the lockout date. And she goes, so I got to move out in 10 days. And I kid you not, it seemed like this guy kind of snapped at her a little bit. He was like, that's not what I said. And I was like, oh, damn. And then she was like, I'm kind of I'm misunderstanding the process here. And he was like, you have 10 days to appeal the decision. If you don't do that, Frank could schedule the lockout date. And she was like, well, what happens if I appeal it? He was like, you need to seek legal counsel at that point. I can't give you any advice of what comes after that. So long story short, that was it. It ruled in my favor. And now we wait and see what happens. However, like I said, she is a good tenant, obviously outside of this eviction stuff. And when we walked out, like it wasn't really any hard feelings. Like we had a conversation and I was just like, listen, like this is not where I wanted to be. I expressed this to you a handful of times. However, the process of how this goes. You've been with me now for 5 months. Like I have to do what I have to do. And that's kind of it. And I was like, listen, I have a 1-bedroom unit that I've told you about. And I know that you don't want to be with this guy that's in your house anymore. Like, if you really want to move into that unit and you come see it this week and you like it and you want to put a first month's security deposit down, I have no problem with that. Because at the end of the day, you're getting out of the house that I need access to, and I can still maintain you as a tenant. And I know that you're a good paying tenant, and I honestly want you. But if you can't do that for me, then we're going to have to do what it is. And I was like, in truth, you have 20 days. Because the 10 days is going to be up. I'm going to schedule a lockout, and they're going to come 10 days later. So you're either out in 20 days and you're locked out and all your stuff's inside and you're on the street, or you can come look at this unit and see if you want it and actually move forward with it. And that's pretty much where it ended. And the way that I see it, because some people listening might be like, yo, you were just in eviction court with this lady. Like, why are you actually trying to put her back in one of your units? The way that I see it is I have the opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If she ends up signing up on another unit I'm going to get a first month's and a security deposit right off the bat. So I'm going to get money out of her. I'm going to take her, I'm going to put her into a 1-bedroom unit, which truthfully is a little bit difficult to occupy in the area that I'm in. So I'm kind of hedging my risk a little bit of going out on the market to try to get a 1-bedroom sold off. So I'm putting her in there, and then I get the house that I need vacant. And to me, it's a win-win. And ultimately, I know that she's good paying. I know that this, January was a little bit of kind of like, he say, she say, and I understand kind of her point on some of that stuff. However, I don't agree with it. And I know that just, she necessarily wasn't paying in February because she thought that she was going to be out, X, Y, and Z. There's still some obviously inherited risk in regards to that. But from my experience from September to December and everything that was before that, I know that she's good paying. And if she's in a good place and she's, focused on what she needs to be focused on, she'll most likely pay the rent. So again, I think there's definitely some controversy in regards to that theory. And I think some people are probably going to be like, you're crazy, don't put her back on. But like I said, I think she's a great tenant. She's overall, someone who has, for the most part, has her stuff together. And I enjoyed having her, at least for the most part, until I ended up in eviction court with her today. So, but again, it pays to know people. It pays to know people. It, as I said, with the electrician yesterday, that definitely was huge. And then just knowing the councilman who probably dropped a little bit of a dime in there as I was kind of going into this court. But overall, we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you guys updated in regards to the move out process and what that looks like and what next steps are. We are currently right now in 3 renovations. So even still, if she left today, we wouldn't be starting it tomorrow. So I got some time in regards to kind of planning for that one. But I'm excited for it. That's a great house. We got it for a great price. And I think we're going to make a killing on the refinance and have a good tenant that's renting that place out. So I'm excited to get in there. But everybody else, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and this story on eviction court. If you've never actually filed an eviction, it all varies. It changes in different states and different counties and all of that stuff. So your experience might not necessarily be the same as mine. And in truth, I hope you don't ever have to experience it because it's usually not fun, especially when they show up and you have to kind of deal with that. But I hope everybody has a great day. Pray the Rosary, buy real estate, and peace out.